My parents invited me to dinner to make amends after 5 years of total silence. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found 15 extended family members waiting. They had already ordered butter-poached lobster Wagyu steaks and multiple $500 bottles of wine. My father wiped his mouth, slid the leather check folder across the table, and smiled. "You are paying right." I did not argue. I called the waiter over and whispered exactly 3 sentences. 10 minutes later, my family learned a very expensive lesson about the daughter they threw away. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who underestimated your worth. I step into the private dining suite of the Obsidian Room, which happens to be Atlanta's most exclusive and difficult-to-book restaurant. I am here for what was supposed to be a quiet reconciliation dinner. For 5 years, I have maintained strict no contact with my parents, Calvin and Vivian. 5 years of peace, 5 years of building my life from the ground up without their constant criticism and financial manipulation weighing me down. When my mother called me last week, her voice dripping with sudden uncharacteristic warmth, she claimed they wanted to heal the rift. She said it would just be the 3 of us. She said they wanted to apologize. Instead, I walk through the heavy mahogany doors and step into a booming, chaotic party. The private suite is packed. 15 extended family members are gathered around a massive custom dining table. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who have not spoken a word to me in half a decade are laughing and drinking loudly. The table itself is a graveyard of pure, unchecked gluttony. I scan the damage. There are empty wooden boards that recently held prime Wagyu tomahawk steaks. There are towering silver seafood platters picked clean of butter-drenched lobster shells and jumbo shrimp. I count at least 3 empty bottles of crystal champagne pushed to the center of the table. The room falls completely silent the moment I step inside. The laughter abruptly stops. 15 pairs of eyes turn to stare at me. Nobody stands up to hug me. Nobody says hello. The atmosphere shifts from a celebration to a calculated ambush. At the head of the table sits my father, Calvin. He looks exactly the same as he did 5 years ago, wearing a tailored suit. He probably cannot afford projecting an image of wealth that has always been a complete facade. He wipes his mouth slowly with a linen napkin, savoring the dramatic tension in the room. He reaches out and picks up a heavy black leather check folder resting next to his empty champagne flute. With a casual, arrogant flick of his wrist, he slides it directly down the long table. It glides across the polished wood and stops right in front of me. Calvin smiles. It is that same condescending, authoritative smile he used to give me when I was a child. "You are paying right, Jada. Consider it back. Pay for avoiding your family duties for half a decade." I look down at the receipt peeking out of the edge of the leather folder. The bold printed total at the bottom is impossible to miss. $5,240. I do not gasp. I do not show any outward sign of the shock they are so clearly waiting for. I slowly lift my gaze and make direct eye contact with my mother, Vivian. She is sitting next to Calvin, swirling a fresh glass of expensive red wine. A satisfied, cruel smirk plays on her lips. She is waiting for me to break. She is waiting for me to panic, to claim poverty, to embarrass myself in front of the entire extended family. Before I can even open my mouth to speak, Vivian decides to twist the knife. She addresses the entire table, making sure her voice is loud enough to echo off the acoustic panels of the private suite. "Now, do not expect too much from Jada." She sighed performatively, placing a hand on her chest. We all know she could not even finish her degree at Spelman, but she can at least cover a meal to celebrate her sister's new house. It is the absolute least she can do for the successful ones in this family. Her words are a deliberate weapon designed to strike at the deepest wound of my past. Dropping out of Spelman College was not a choice I made lightly, and she knows exactly why it happened. But here in front of aunts and uncles who love gossip more than they love each other, she spins it as a personal failure. Sitting directly across from Vivian is my younger sister, Kendra. She is the undisputed golden child of the family. Today, she is dripping in designer logos, wearing a dress that screams new money. Kendra leans heavily against her husband, Trent. Trent is a white man who married into our African-American family 5 years ago. From the day he arrived, he has worn his privilege like a weapon, eagerly participating in my family's toxic dynamics because it makes him feel superior. Trent laughs loudly at my mother's comment. It is a harsh, grating sound that fills the room. He raises his glass of champagne and points it in my direction. "Let us toast to Jada," he announces with a wide, mocking grin. Generous even if she is struggling. Thank you for treating us, Jada. I know things have been hard for you without a degree, but contributing to Kendra and my success today shows real growth. He drinks his champagne completely satisfied with his own insult. He is mocking my supposed financial instability, assuming I am still the broke, desperate 20-year-old girl they discarded years ago. They think I am standing here calculating how many months of rent this dinner is going to cost me. The extended family chuckles along with Trent murmuring their agreement. They are enjoying the show. They have eaten thousands of dollars worth of premium food, and now they get the added entertainment of watching the family scapegoat take the fall for it. I stand perfectly still. I do not cry. I do not argue. I do not pull out a credit card to prove my worth to people who hold no value in my life. I simply raise my right hand slightly. Within seconds, Julian approaches the table. Julian is the general manager of the Obsidian Room. He is impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, moving with the quiet, efficient grace of someone who runs a multi-million-dollar hospitality operation. The family watches him approach, their smiles widening. They are waiting for me to embarrass myself by begging this upscale restaurant manager for a payment plan or asking to split the bill 15 ways. Instead, I lean in as Julian stops beside me. I whisper exactly 3 sentences to him. The volume is so low that even Trent, who is straining to hear, cannot catch a single word. Julian does not bat an eye. His professional expression remains completely neutral. He simply gives a deep, respectful nod, picks up the leather check folder from the table, and walks away toward the heavy mahogany doors. The moment the doors close behind him, the family erupts into mocking laughter. Calvin leans back in his expensive chair, crossing his arms over his chest, maxing out a high-interest credit card just to save face in front of the family. He chuckles, shaking his head. You always were financially illiterate, Jada. You never knew how to handle money. Vivian takes a sip of her wine. Well, Calvin pride makes people do foolish things. Let her pay. Maybe it will teach her some responsibility. They resume their loud conversations, entirely dismissing my presence. They go back to celebrating their free luxury meal, patting themselves on the back for successfully ambushing me. Trent loudly brags to an uncle about the massive square footage of his new house, while Kendra details the expensive interior designers she has hired. They are basking in my apparent humiliation. I remain standing at the end of the table. I do not look at my phone. I do not sit down. I simply watch them. I watch the people who stole my future 15 years ago gorge themselves on my present. 10 minutes pass. The heavy mahogany doors to the private suite swing open again. Julian returns, but he is not carrying a credit card receipt for me to sign. He is not carrying a pen. He walks directly past Calvin. He ignores Vivian. He stops right next to me. In his hands, he carries a stack of thick, black legal folders. The room grows quiet as Julian places the heavy folders directly into my hands with another respectful nod. He steps back, standing at attention just behind my right shoulder, waiting for my next command. I look down at the black folders. Then I look up at my father, whose smug smile is slowly beginning to falter. The trap they thought they set for me has just snapped shut on them, and they have absolutely no idea how much it is going to cost them to get out. Trent squints at the folders in my hands. What is that? He sneers, his voice dripping with condescension. Are you handing out your resume now, Jada? Because I do not think my company is hiring college dropouts right now. I smile. It is a slow, cold smile that causes the temperature in the room to drop. I look Trent dead in the eye, holding his arrogant gaze until he shifts uncomfortably in his seat. I did not pay the $5,000 bill with a credit card, Trent. I inform him, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room. The meal was entirely comped. Kendra scoffs, rolling her eyes. Comped? Why on earth would a place like the Obsidian Room comp a $5,000 meal for you? Did you beg the manager? I look at my sister taking in her designer dress and the diamond tennis bracelet catching the light of the chandelier. I do not need to beg for anything, Kendra, I reply smoothly. The meal was comped because I own this restaurant. In fact, I own the entire luxury hospitality group that manages it. I am the owner of the Obsidian Room. The arrogant laughter dies instantly. Forks drop onto porcelain plates with sharp clattering sounds. Calvin's face turns ash and the color draining from his cheeks as the reality of my words sets in. He stares at me, his eyes darting to Julian, who stands perfectly still behind me, silently confirming my statement. The daughter they just mocked as a broke, struggling failure is the sole owner of the most prestigious dining establishment in the city of Atlanta. For several long seconds, no one breathes. The silence is absolute, heavy with the crushing weight of their shattered assumptions. Then, without missing a single beat, Vivian completely shifts gears. The cruel smirk vanishes from her face, instantly replaced by a sickly, sweet, performative, motherly smile. She attempts to gaslight the entire room in real time, trying to rewrite the last 20 minutes of history. "Oh, Jada, baby," she sings out, pressing her hands together. "We knew that. We came here to support your business. This dinner was our way of celebrating you and all your hard work. We are just so proud of our girl." The sheer audacity of her lie is breathtaking. She expects me to play along, to accept this sudden pivot and maintain the polite family facade in front of the relatives. I cut her off immediately. I refuse to let her rewrite history. "Do not insult my intelligence, Vivian," I say, my voice sharp enough to slice through her fake warmth. "You literally just called me a Spelman dropout in front of 15 people. You demanded I pay a $5,000 bill as a punishment for 5 years of silence. You did not come here to support me. You came here to use me." Vivian opens her mouth to argue, but I do not give her the space. I slide the first thick black legal folder across the polished mahogany table. It stops perfectly between Calvin and Trent. "If you came here to support me, Vivian," I say, my tone dropping to a deadly calm, "then I have a very serious question for you. Why did my father and my brother-in-law spend the last 3 weeks trying to defraud my lending firm?" I look down at the heavy black leather binding of the legal folders resting in my hands. The smooth texture is cool against my palms. For a brief moment, the room remains suspended in a tense quiet. Then Trent shatters the silence with a loud, braying laugh. He leans back in his plush dining chair, stretching his arms out wide like he owns the very air in the private suite. He looks at the folders in my hands and then looks at me with a pitying smirk. "What is that, Jada?" he asks. His voice carries that specific brand of unearned confidence that only comes from a lifetime of privilege. "Are you handing out your resume now? Because let me tell you, my firm is not exactly looking to hire college dropouts at the moment. Maybe try asking Julian if the kitchen staff is hiring. I am sure they could use someone to wash dishes after a busy weekend shift." Kendra giggles, leaning her head against his shoulder. She runs a hand over her diamond tennis bracelet, making sure the dining room lights catch the stones. "Oh, Trent, do not be mean to her," she says, using her fake, sympathetic voice, the one she reserves for charity galas and public apologies. Maybe she printed out a payment plan for the restaurant manager to sign, or maybe she is passing around a donation bucket. We all know how hard it must be out there for her without a degree. We should probably chip in a few dollars for her gas money home. Trent takes a large sip of his wine. He swirls the expensive liquid in his crystal glass, staring at me with outright contempt. "You know, Jada, if you needed money, you should have just asked. Family builds family, right, Calvin?" He looks over at my father, who nods in solemn agreement. Despite having stolen my entire future 15 years ago, Trent turns his attention back to me. "Kendra and I just closed on a $1.5 million mortgage for our new estate in Buckhead. We did not want to brag tonight, but since you are clearly struggling, we thought you should see what real success actually looks like. 6 bedrooms, a custom pool, a temperature-controlled wine cellar. We are the true success story of this family. Jada. We know how to navigate the real world, how to build wealth and status while you are passing out paper folders at a dinner table trying to look important to people who actually matter." The extended family nods along, murmuring their enthusiastic approval of Trent and Kendra. My aunts and uncles whisper to each other, casting judgmental glances my way. They are completely captivated by the illusion of wealth, my sister and her husband project. They look at Trent like he is the absolute savior of our family lineage, a white man who brought them status, proximity to whiteness, and financial validation. They look at me like I am a stain on their perfect portrait, an embarrassing reminder of struggle they wish they could erase. I let Trent finish his long, self-serving monologue. I let the arrogance settle deep into his bones. I let the entire table bask in the false superiority of their collective delusion. I do not raise my voice. I do not show a single ounce of anger or frustration. I simply look at Trent dead in the eye and smile. It is a slow, calculated smile that makes the smugness on Trent's face falter for a fraction of a second. "That is a beautiful story, Trent," I say smoothly, holding his gaze. "A $1.5 million mortgage is certainly a massive commitment. It takes a lot of confidence to take on that kind of debt, especially in this economy. But you are making a very large assumption about what is happening here right now. I place the black legal folders gently onto the polished mahogany table. The dull, heavy thud draws every eye in the room. I keep my focus entirely on Trent, making sure he hears every single syllable I speak. You assume I just handed over a high-interest credit card to Julian to cover your $5,000 feast. I continue, my voice cutting through the remaining whispers in the room. You assume I am passing out resumes because you cannot fathom a reality where I am anything other than the failure you desperately need me to be. But I did not pay the $5,240 bill with a credit card. Trent, I did not ask for a payment plan. I did not beg the manager for mercy. Trent frowns. His brow furrows in deep confusion. Then what did you do? He asks, his tone losing a significant fraction of its bravado. Did you wash dishes in the back to pay it off? The meal was completely comped, I state clearly. My father, Calvin, lets out a sharp, dismissive snort. Comped? Why on earth would a place like the Obsidian Room comp a $5,000 bill for you? You are a nobody, Jada. Restaurants like this do not just hand out free luxury meals to people off the street. I turn my attention from Trent to my father. I look at the man who drained my college fund, who watched me face homelessness without lifting a single finger to help. I look at the man who invited me here today solely to humiliate me and assert his dominance in front of our relatives. You are right, Calvin, I say, my voice perfectly level. Restaurants like this do not hand out free luxury meals to people off the street. They do, however, comp meals for the owner. The word hangs in the air, suspended in the sudden absolute silence of the private dining suite. The meal was comped because I own the Obsidian Room. I announce the truth, striking the table like a physical blow. I own this building. I own the kitchen you just joked about me working in. I own the chairs you are sitting on. In fact, I own the entire luxury hospitality group that manages this property and 12 others just like it across the state of Georgia. The arrogant laughter that had filled the room just moments ago dies instantly. The silence is profound, deafening, and absolute. Someone at the far end of the table drops a heavy silver fork onto their porcelain plate. The sharp clatter rings out like a gunshot, but no one moves to pick it up. I watch the color completely drain from Calvin's face. His dark skin turns a sickly ashen gray. His jaw drops open, but no sound comes out. The smug, authoritative posture he had maintained all evening crumbles in the span of a single heartbeat. The realization hits him with the devastating force of a freight train. The daughter he just mocked as a broke, struggling failure. The daughter he invited here to publicly shame is the sole owner of the most prestigious dining establishment in the city of Atlanta. Trent stares at me, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with a mixture of raw shock and sheer disbelief. The man who had just boasted about a mortgage he barely secured is now sitting in a multi-million-dollar property owned outright by the black woman he was just trying to degrade. The power dynamic in the room has violently shifted, violently snapping their fabricated reality perfectly in half. My parents invited me to a luxury dinner to finally make amends after 5 years of dead silence. But when I walked into the private dining suite, I did not find a quiet apology. I found 15 extended family members who had just finished devouring over $5,000 worth of lobster and Wagyu beef. My father wiped his mouth, slid the massive bill across the table, and told me it was time to pay my dues. I did not scream or cry. I simply called the waiter over and whispered 3 short sentences. 10 minutes later, my toxicly learned a devastating lesson about the daughter they threw away. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below and hit subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a family who completely underestimated your worth. The humidity of the Atlanta evening clung to my skin as I handed my keys to the valet outside the Obsidian Room. It is the most exclusive and difficult to book restaurant in the entire city, a place where reservations are traded like currency. I was there for what was supposed to be a quiet, private reconciliation dinner. For 5 long years, I had maintained strict no contact with my parents, Calvin and Vivian. 5 years of absolute peace. 5 years of building my life and my business from the ground up without their constant criticism and financial manipulation weighing me down. When my mother called me last week, her voice was dripping with a sudden, uncharacteristic warmth. She claimed they wanted to heal the rift between us. She promised it would just be the 3 of us in a private suite. She said they wanted to apologize for the past. I stepped through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant, letting the cool, climate-controlled air wash over me. The hostess smiled warmly and guided me down the dimly lit velvet-lined hallway toward the VIP dining suite. My heart was beating in a steady, measured rhythm. I had spent years in therapy processing the trauma my parents inflicted on me, and I felt ready to hear them out. But the moment the hostess pulled open the tall mahogany doors to the private suite, that fragile hope evaporated instantly. I did not walk into a quiet, intimate apology. I walked into a booming, chaotic party. The private suite was packed to the absolute brim. 15 extended family members were gathered around a massive custom oak dining table. Aunts, uncles, and cousins, who had not spoken a single word to me in half a decade, were laughing, cheering, and drinking loudly. The table itself was a graveyard of pure, unchecked gluttony. I stood in the doorway and scanned the damage. There were empty wooden carving boards that had recently held prime Wagyu tomahawk steaks. There were towering silver seafood tiers picked completely clean of butter, drenched lobster shells, Alaskan king crab legs, and jumbo shrimp. I counted at least 3 empty bottles of premium vintage champagne pushed to the center of the table. The room fell completely silent the moment I stepped inside. The boisterous laughter abruptly stopped, replaced by the awkward shifting of chairs. 15 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. Nobody stood up to hug me. Nobody said a simple hello. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly from a joyous celebration to a calculated icy ambush. At the head of the long table sat my father, Calvin. He looked exactly the same as he did 5 years ago, wearing a flashy tailored suit he absolutely could not afford. My father has always projected an image of immense wealth that has forever been a complete facade. He wiped his mouth slowly with a white linen napkin, savoring the dramatic tension hanging heavily in the room. He reached out and picked up a thick black leather check folder resting next to his empty champagne flute. With a casual, deeply arrogant flick of his wrist, he slid the folder directly down the long, polished table. It glided across the wood and stopped precisely in front of me. Calvin smiled. It was that same condescending, authoritative smile he used to give me when I was a helpless child. "You are paying right, Jada," he said, his voice smooth and entirely unbothered. "Consider it back pay for avoiding your family duties for half a decade." I looked down at the crisp white receipt peeking out of the edge of the leather folder. The bold printed total at the bottom was impossible to miss. $5,240. I did not gasp. I did not show a single outward sign of the shock or panic they were so clearly waiting for. I slowly lifted my gaze and made direct eye contact with my mother, Vivian. She was sitting right next to Calvin, gracefully swirling a fresh glass of expensive red wine. A satisfied, cruel smirk played on her lips. She was waiting for me to break. She was waiting for me to start trembling, to claim poverty, to embarrass myself in front of the entire extended family by admitting I could not afford to feed them. Before I could even open my mouth to speak, Vivian decided to twist the knife. She addressed the entire table, making sure her voice was loud enough to echo off the acoustic panels of the private suite. "Now, do not expect too much from Jada," she sighed performatively, placing a perfectly manicured hand on her chest. "We all know she could not even finish her degree at Spelman, but she can at least cover a simple meal to celebrate her sister's new house. It is the absolute least she can do for the successful ones in this family." Her words were a deliberate, calculated weapon designed to strike at the deepest wound of my past. Dropping out of Spelman College was not a choice I made lightly, and she knew exactly why it happened. But here in front of Aunt Sheila and Uncle David and cousins who love gossip more than they love each other, she spun my painful history into a personal moral failure. Sitting directly across from Vivian was my younger sister, Kendra. She has always been the undisputed golden child of our family. Today, she was dripping in designer logos, wearing a dress that screamed new money and a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the light of the crystal chandelier. Kendra leaned heavily against her husband, Trent. Trent is a wealthy white man who married into our African-American family 5 years ago. From the very day he arrived, he has worn his privilege like a weapon, eagerly participating in my family's toxic dynamics because it makes him feel powerful and superior. Trent laughed loudly at my mother's comment. It was a harsh grating sound that filled the quiet room. He raised his glass of champagne and pointed it directly at me. "Let us toast to Jada," he announced with a wide, mocking grin. "Generous, even if she is struggling. Thank you for treating us today, Jada. I know things have been hard for you without a degree, but contributing to Kendra and my success today shows some real growth on your part." He drank his champagne, completely satisfied with his own insult. He was mocking my supposed financial instability, assuming I was still the broke, desperate 20-year-old girl they discarded years ago. They all thought I was standing there frantically calculating how many months of rent this single dinner was going to cost me. The extended family chuckled along with Trent, murmuring their agreement and raising their own glasses in my direction. They were thoroughly enjoying the show. They had just eaten thousands of dollars worth of premium food, and now they were getting the added entertainment of watching the family scapegoat take the devastating financial fall for it. I stood perfectly still near the doorway. I did not cry. I did not argue. I did not pull out a credit card to prove my worth to people who held absolutely no value in my life. I simply raised my right hand slightly into the air. Within seconds, Julian approached the table. Julian is the general manager of the Obsidian Room. He is impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, moving with the quiet, efficient grace of someone who runs a multi-million-dollar hospitality operation. The family watched him approach, their smiles widening with anticipation. They were eagerly waiting for me to embarrass myself. They wanted to watch me beg this upscale restaurant manager for a payment plan or ask to awkwardly split the bill 15 ways. Instead, I leaned in close as Julian stopped right beside me. I whispered exactly 3 sentences to him. The volume of my voice was so low that even Trent, who was leaning forward and straining his neck to hear, could not catch a single word. Julian did not bat an eye. His professional expression remained completely neutral. He simply gave a deep, respectful nod, picked up the heavy leather check folder from the table, and walked away toward the heavy mahogany doors. The moment the doors closed behind him, the family erupted into fresh, mocking laughter. Calvin leaned back in his expensive chair, crossing his arms over his chest with an air of absolute triumph, maxing out a high-interest credit card just to save face in front of the family. He chuckled, shaking his head slowly. "You always were financially illiterate, Jada. You never knew how to handle money properly." Vivian took a delicate sip of her wine. "Well, Calvin pride makes people do very foolish things. Let her pay. Maybe working off this debt will finally teach her some responsibility." They quickly resumed their loud conversations, entirely dismissing my presence as if I were just a piece of the furniture. They went back to celebrating their free luxury meal, patting themselves on the back for successfully ambushing me. Trent loudly bragged to my uncle about the massive square footage of his new house, while Kendra detailed the expensive interior designers she had recently hired. They were completely basking in my apparent humiliation. I remained standing at the end of the long table. I did not look at my phone to distract myself. I did not pull up a chair to join them. I simply watched them. I watched the very people who stole my future 15 years ago gorge themselves on my present. I studied their greedy, self-satisfied faces, feeling a profound sense of calm wash over my entire body. 10 minutes passed. The heavy mahogany doors to the private suite swung open again. Julian returned, but he was not carrying a little black tray with a credit card receipt for me to sign. He was not carrying a pen. He walked directly past Calvin. He completely ignored Vivian. He stopped right next to me. In his hands, he carried a thick stack of heavy black legal folders. The room grew noticeably quiet as Julian placed the heavy folders directly into my hands, with another highly respectful nod. He took a calculated step back, standing at attention just behind my right shoulder, waiting patiently for my next command. I looked down at the black folders in my hands. Then I looked up at my father, whose smug, victorious smile was slowly beginning to falter at the edges. The trap they thought they had so cleverly set for me had just snapped shut directly on them, and they had absolutely no idea how much it was going to cost them to get out. The question hangs in the air, suspended in the sudden absolute silence of the private dining suite. Vivian blinks rapidly, completely derailed by the accusation. Her performative smile melts off her face, leaving behind a mask of pure confusion. Trent reacts much differently. The color in his face goes from pale to a violently bright shade of red. He abruptly pushes his heavy dining chair back. The wooden legs scrape harshly against the polished floor. He stands up, attempting to use his height and his physical presence to reclaim the authority he just lost. Trent has always used his privilege like a shield in our family. He expects his loud voice and his angry posture to immediately silence me. I expect the world to bend to his narrative because it always has. But tonight he is standing inside my fortress, and his usual tactics mean absolutely nothing. "What the hell are you talking about?" He demands, his voice booming across the room. "Defraud your lending firm. You are out of your mind, Jada. You are just making things up because you are jealous of the new mansion Kendra and I just bought in Buckhead." I do not raise my voice to match his shouting. I do not need to. I simply open the first black legal folder resting in my hands. I pull out a thick stack of heavily highlighted financial documents, and I lay them flat on the mahogany table right where the overhead chandelier illuminates every single printed word. I am talking about Apex Capital Trent. I say, my voice perfectly calm and steady. I am the founder and the majority shareholder of the private equity firm that recently purchased a massive portfolio of luxury residential mortgages in the Atlanta metropolitan area. I turn my gaze to my sister. Kendra is staring at the documents on the table. Her diamond tennis bracelet suddenly looks very heavy on her wrist. She reaches out and grips Trent by the sleeve of his tailored jacket. Your new $1.5 million estate is in that exact portfolio, Kendra, I inform her, watching the panic slowly dawn in her eyes. My firm currently holds the deed to your dream house. Trent scoffs loudly, shaking his head in aggressive denial. That is impossible, he snaps, pointing a finger at me. We were approved by a major national bank, Jada. We did not borrow a single dime from some private equity firm run by a college dropout. You do not know what you are talking about. I look at him with a mixture of pity and deep amusement. I explain the secondary mortgage market to him, speaking slowly and clearly as if I am addressing a stubborn child. I tell him that major banks frequently bundle and sell their luxury mortgages to private equity firms to clear their own balance sheets. I tell him that my firm, Apex Capital, bought his specific debt portfolio 3 weeks ago. And when my firm takes over a new portfolio, I continue holding his angry gaze. We run a thorough secondary audit on every single loan application to ensure the assets are secure. My company employs some of the most ruthless forensic accountants in the state of Georgia, and they flagged your application within 48 hours of acquiring the debt. Trent swallows hard. His chest is heaving, but he stops shouting. The blustering confidence is rapidly draining out of him, replaced by the very real terror of a man who knows he has been caught. I pick up the top document from the stack. I read the figures out loud, ensuring that every aunt, uncle, and cousin in the room hears exactly how the golden child of the family secured her luxury lifestyle. You stated on your primary loan application that your independent consulting firm generated $800,000 in profit last year, I say, tapping the paper. But my accountants pulled the actual corporate tax filings. You inflated your income by a massive 400%. Trent, you barely cleared $200,000. I pick up the next document and turn my attention to my sister. Kendra shrinks back in her chair, trying to hide behind her husband. And you, Kendra, failed to disclose over $250,000 in defaulted credit card debt. You intentionally spread that debt across various shell accounts registered to fake LLCs to hide it from the initial bank underwriters. You both submitted forged tax returns to push the final approval through. The extended family members react immediately. The very same aunts and uncles who were just raising their champagne glasses to toast Trent and his massive success are now physically leaning away from him. They look at Trent and Kendra as if federal wire fraud is a contagious disease. The illusion of their wealth has been entirely shattered. They are not the pinnacle of success. They are criminals who built a house of cards on stolen money. Kendra starts panicking. The reality of the situation crashes down on her. She has never faced a single real consequence in her entire 32 years of life. Whenever she made a mistake, our parents always rushed in to clean it up and pay the damages. Her face crumples into an ugly mask of fear. She looks at Trent, and then she looks frantically at our mother. She starts crying, letting out loud, desperate sobs. She is playing the victim, hoping someone in the room will save her. Calvin finally realizes the absolute severity of the situation. His golden child and his prized son-in-law are not just facing financial ruin. They are facing federal fraud charges and immediate foreclosure. But Calvin does not apologize to me. He does not express an ounce of shame for mocking me all evening. Instead, he resorts to his old toxic tactics. He resorts to intimidation and aggressive demands. He believes he owns my success simply because he contributed half of my genetics. He believes he can order me to erase a massive financial crime because it benefits his favorite daughter. Calvin stands up, pushing his chair back with incredible force. He slams his heavy fist down onto the solid mahogany table. The impact shakes the wood, causing the expensive crystal wine glasses to rattle and clink sharply against each other. The loud noise startles the entire room into silence. He points a rigid, trembling finger directly at my face. His eyes are burning with desperate, furious authority. You are going to forgive their debt right now, Jada. He demands, his voice booming with the toxic patriarchal power that kept me trapped in this family for years. You are going to take those papers and you are going to tear them up. You are not going to ruin your sister over some paperwork mistake. Family builds family. The phrase hangs heavy in the humid air of the private dining suite. Family builds family. It is the exact toxic mantra they use to justify every single horrible thing they ever did to me. It is the phrase they use to demand my blind loyalty while actively destroying my life. I look at my father's furious face. I look at the red-faced, entitled man standing next to my weeping sister. I do not flinch. I do not back down. The fear that used to paralyze me when my father raised his voice is completely gone. I take a slow, deep breath, ready to tear down the very foundation of their hypocrisy. Family builds family. I repeat the words slowly, letting the sheer absurdity of the statement wash over the quiet room. The sound of my father's heavy fist striking the mahogany table still seems to echo off the acoustic panels, but it does not intimidate me anymore. I look at Calvin watching his chest heave as he tries to assert a patriarchal dominance he surrendered the right to claim a very long time ago. You have incredible nerve, Calvin, I say, my voice dropping to a dangerous, steady calm. You stand in a building I own, surrounded by wealth I created, and you dare to invoke the concept of family to save yourselves from federal fraud charges. You demand that I erase a $1.5 million debt because we share the same blood. But where was that unbreakable family bond 15 years ago? I turn my attention to my mother. Vivian refuses to meet my gaze. She suddenly finds the empty wine glass in front of her absolutely fascinating. Her jaw is tight, and she is nervously picking at her manicured nails. You both thought I would just stay quiet forever. I continue stepping closer to the table so they are forced to look at me. You thought I would simply carry your dirty secrets to my grave out of some misplaced sense of daughterly duty. You thought the shame of being the family failure would keep my mouth shut. But we are telling the truth tonight. All of it. I address the extended aunts, uncles, and cousins who are sitting in stunned silence. Their eyes dart between me and my parents, eager for the gossip, but terrified of the fallout. I want all of you to hear exactly how Calvin and Vivian funded their lifestyle of fake luxury. I want you to know exactly how Kendra and Trent paid for their perfect magazine cover wedding. When my grandmother passed away, she left a dedicated college trust fund, specifically in my name. It was meant to cover my full tuition at Spelman College with enough left over to help me start a business after graduation. It was my future secured by a woman who actually loved me unconditionally, but because I was still a minor when she passed, Calvin and Vivian were named as the temporary custodial managers of that account. I paused, letting the weight of the setup sink in. I remember the exact day I discovered their betrayal. I was 19 years old, sitting in the bursar's office at Spelman, excited to register for my junior year classes. The financial aid officer looked at me with deep pity and told me my tuition check had bounced. She told me the trust account was completely empty. I thought there had been a massive banking error. I called you Vivian in a complete panic, crying in the middle of the campus courtyard, and you coldly told me that the money was gone, that you needed it for family emergencies, and that I was being a selfish, ungrateful child for asking about it. But it was not an emergency, was it? I looked directly at Kendra, who is now shrinking down in her expensive chair, trying to make herself as small as possible. You drained my entire future to pay for your golden child. You stole my education to pay for Kendra and Trent's lavish, over-the-top wedding. I remember seeing the pictures posted all over social media. The imported white orchids cascading down the walls, the custom designer wedding gown, the 6-tier cake, and the open bar serving top-shelf liquor to hundreds of guests. Every single detail of that perfect day was paid for with stolen money. The relatives gasp. One of my aunts covers her mouth with her hands, staring at Vivian in pure horror. The pristine image of my parents' success is unraveling violently in front of the very people they tried so hard to impress. And it did not stop at the wedding, I say, turning back to my father. You took the rest of my grandmother's money to bail out your failing commercial ventures. You bought expensive tailored suits and leased luxury cars to parade around Atlanta, pretending to be a highly successful businessman, all while using the funds meant for your youngest daughter's education. You stole from your own child, so you could play pretend at the country club. Calvin opens his mouth to speak to offer some flimsy defense, but no words come out. He knows I have the complete truth on my side. You did not just cut me off. You actively robbed me when I confronted you about it. When I came home crying and begging for an explanation of how I was supposed to finish my degree, you packed up my childhood bedroom and changed the locks on the front door. You threw me out onto the street and told the rest of the family that I had suffered a mental breakdown and dropped out of school because I was too lazy to do the coursework. You spun a narrative of my failure to cover up your massive financial theft. The memories of those dark months rush back to me, but they do not break my composure. They only fuel my absolute certainty in this moment. While Kendra was away on a 3-week honeymoon in the Maldives, I was packing my few remaining belongings into black garbage bags. While you were hosting dinner parties and bragging about your wealthy new white son-in-law, I was sleeping in the back seat of my used Honda Civic in a 2-4-hour grocery store parking lot. I spent 6 months living out of my car, washing my face in public restrooms, and eating dollar menu meals just to survive the freezing winter. I worked 3 minimum wage jobs simultaneously, just to keep myself from starving while you paraded around the city on the money my grandmother left for me. I walk slowly around the edge of the large dining table until I am standing directly behind Kendra. She stiffens her shoulders, going entirely rigid with guilt and fear. Trent looks up at me, his face pale, the arrogant smirk completely wiped from his features. He knows there is no defense for what I am saying. I lean down, placing my hands firmly on the back of Kendra's chair, bringing my face close to hers. You walk down the aisle on my dime. Kendra, I say, my voice crystal clear and laced with absolute certainty. You smiled for the cameras and toasted to your beautiful new life with Trent, all while I was forced to drop out of Spelman and live out of my car for 6 months because of your greed. Instead of showing even a single ounce of remorse, Kendra just rolls her eyes. She actually scoffs. She leans into her husband and whispers something in his ear. Trent nods his face, hardening into a mask of pure aristocratic entitlement. He pushes his chair back and stands up to his full height. He is a tall man, and he has always used his physical presence to intimidate the people in my family. He places his large hands flat on the table and leans across the mahogany surface, invading my personal space. He raises his right hand and points a long, aggressive finger directly at my face. Listen to me very closely, Jada, he says, his voice dripping with condescension. You are going to back off right now. You think you can waltz in here after 5 years and disrespect your parents. You think a little bit of lucky money gives you the right to talk to my wife like that? I do not flinch. I do not step back. I stand my ground and look at the finger pointed mere inches from my nose. You owe this family. Trent continues, his voice rising in volume, ensuring every single relative hears his declaration. Calvin and Vivian did what they had to do to protect the respectable, polished face of this family. Look at Kendra. Look at me. We are the ones who belong in Buckhead. We are the ones who host the charity galas who bring actual status and prestige to your parents. You are just a bitter college dropout who stumbled into some money and thinks she can buy class. We are the success story here. We deserve that house, and you are going to forgive that mortgage because without us, this family is nothing but a joke. The sheer audacity of his white privilege breathing down my neck in a room full of my own relatives is staggering. He genuinely believes that his proximity to my sister elevates him above me. He genuinely believes that their fabricated high society lifestyle justifies the absolute destruction of my youth. I push my chair back and stand up, matching his energy. I plant my hands on the table, leaning in, so our faces are only a few feet apart. Your respectable, polished face is currently 90 days past due on a mortgage you cannot afford. Trent, I say, my voice slicing through the tension like a blade, you do not bring status to this family. You bring debt. You bring fraud. You bring a perfectly manicured facade built entirely on stolen funds and inflated tax returns. You do not belong in Buckhead. You belong in a courtroom. For a fraction of a second, genuine fear flashes across Trent's blue eyes. I have stripped away his armor of wealth and exposed the rotting foundation underneath. He glances at Calvin, who is sweating profusely, wiping his forehead with his cloth napkin. The extended family is dead silent, watching the golden couple absolutely unravel before their very eyes. Driven completely into a corner, Trent's arrogance morphs into pure maliciousness. He realizes he cannot win the moral argument. He realizes he cannot intimidate me into submission. So, he resorts to his final desperate play. He lets out a harsh, grating laugh that sounds like breaking glass. You really think you have us beat, do you? He sneers, standing up straight and adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit jacket. You think because you bought up our debt, you get to call the shots? You think you are the untouchable CEO of Apex Capital? He reaches his hand into the inner breast pocket of his jacket. He pulls out a thick piece of paper folded neatly in thirds. He unfolds it with a sharp flick of his wrist and slams it violently onto the table between us. You are not foreclosing on us, Jada, he declares, his voice echoing with absolute triumph. And you are sure as hell not forgiving the debt, because you do not own Apex Capital anymore. The extended family gasps in unison. My mother, Vivian, suddenly sits up incredibly straight, a victorious gleam returning to her eyes. Calvin finally stops sweating and smiles, a predatory, highly calculated grin. Trent taps his finger hard against the document on the table. It is a legally binding collateral agreement complete with an official state notary stamp. You signed your business over to your parents years ago as collateral for a family loan. Trent announces loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. Your father and I filed the transfer paperwork yesterday morning. We own your firm. We own the mortgage. We own you. The absolute audacity of his declaration slams into the room like a physical shockwave. The extended family gasps in unison. My aunts and uncles, who were just shrinking away from Trent a moment ago, now lean forward in their heavy leather chairs, completely captivated by this sudden aggressive shift in power. My mother, Vivian, suddenly sits up incredibly straight, a victorious gleam returning to her eyes. She quickly reaches for her wine glass, taking a long triumphant sip, as if she has just won a championship game. Calvin finally stops sweating. He lowers the cloth napkin from his forehead and smiles a predatory, highly calculated grin. He steps up to stand right beside Trent, shoulder to shoulder, forming a united front of toxic patriarchal authority. Trent taps his index finger hard against the document resting on the polished mahogany table. He wants to make sure I am looking at it. He wants to make sure I fully comprehend the magnitude of the trap they have supposedly sprung on me. We filed it yesterday morning with the state, Trent says, his voice thick with unearned confidence. It is a legally binding collateral agreement, complete with an official Georgia notary stamp. It clearly outlines that you surrendered your corporate entities to your parents in exchange for the startup capital they provided you years ago. You defaulted on that phantom loan, Jada. So Calvin and Vivian executed their right to collect. I look at the piece of paper. It is a brilliant, fascinating piece of pure fiction. Calvin and Vivian never gave me a single dime of startup capital. They never gave me a loan. They threw me out onto the street with nothing but the clothes on my back. But they have fabricated an entire alternate reality on a piece of heavy bond paper, and they actually expect me to fall to my knees and surrender my life to them. Calvin buttons the center button of his cheap-tailored suit jacket, trying to look like a legitimate corporate raider rather than a desperate aging man trying to steal from his own daughter for the second time. You should not have tried to humiliate us tonight, Jada, Calvin says, his voice dripping with false paternal disappointment. You built this empire on the foundation we provided you. We gave you your life, we gave you your drive, and you tried to use your success to punish your own sister. So we are simply taking back what is rightfully ours. You forced our hand. I stare at my father, marveling at the sheer psychological gymnastics required to justify this level of theft. He has genuinely convinced himself that robbing me is a righteous act of family preservation. Vivian nods along, leaning her elbows on the table. We are just putting things back in their proper order, baby, she says, offering me a sickeningly sweet smile. You always were too arrogant for your own good. You should have known better than to challenge your father. Now be a good girl and do what Trent says. Make this easy on yourself. Trent pulls his expensive smartphone out of his pocket and holds it up so the bright screen illuminates his face. He is weaponizing his privilege, perfectly comfortable using the threat of law enforcement against a black woman to get exactly what he wants. Here is how this is going to work. Jada. Trent dictates his tone completely devoid of any familial warmth. You are going to sit down at this table. You are going to log into your administrative portals right now. You are going to transfer the operational licenses for the Obsidian Room directly into Calvin's name. You are going to hand over the digital access keys to Apex Capital, and you are going to sign a full release form discharging the mortgage on my Buckhead estate. He takes a step closer to me, holding the phone up higher. If you do not do exactly as I say within the next 5 minutes, I am dialing 911. Trent threatens, his voice echoing off the acoustic panels of the private suite. I am calling the Atlanta Police Department. I am going to show them this notarized document proving that Calvin owns this hospitality group, and I will have you dragged out of this restaurant in handcuffs for trespassing on private property. Kendra lets out a soft, relieved sigh from her chair. She reaches out and touches Trent's arm, looking at him like he is a conquering hero who just slayed a dragon. Just do it, Jada Kendra whispers, playing the role of the sympathetic sister. Just sign the transfers and walk away. Do not make Trent call the police. You know how these things go. It is just easier this way. You can always go start another bakery or whatever it is you do. I do not look at Kendra. I do not look at the phone in Trent's hand. I look down at the heavy bond paper resting on the mahogany table between us. I reach out and pick up the document. The room holds its collective breath. They think I am defeated. They think they have successfully cornered the billionaire and executed the most brilliant hostile takeover in the history of Atlanta real estate. I can practically hear Vivian mentally redecorating the restaurant in her head. I can see Calvin imagining the respect he will get at the country club when he claims he built this hospitality empire from scratch. I hold the paper up to the light of the crystal chandelier. It is a masterpiece. I have to admit, I am genuinely impressed by the craftsmanship. Trent did not just hire some amateur off the street, he went to a professional. He went to someone operating deep on the dark web who knows exactly what they are doing. The legal jargon is meticulously crafted, mimicking the exact formatting required by the Georgia Secretary of State. The notary stamp is embossed perfectly, bearing the name of a real registered official and the signature. I trace my eyes over the blue ink resting at the bottom of the page. Jada Elise, the slant of the letters, the sharp aggressive cross of the letter T, the sweeping curve of the capital J. It looks exactly like the way I sign my corporate contracts. It is a flawless, impeccable forgery. They paid incredibly good money for this piece of paper. They truly believe they hold the key to my total destruction right here in their hands. I feel a profound, chilling sense of calm wash over my entire body. I do not scream. I do not cry. I do not beg them for mercy. I do not exhibit a single ounce of the panic they are so desperately craving from me. I possess the absolute stillness of a predator watching its prey walk willingly right into a locked steel cage. I slowly lower the document. I place it gently back onto the polished mahogany table, taking a moment to smooth out a small crease in the corner of the heavy paper. I reach out and pick up my crystal glass of sparkling water. I feel the cold condensation against my fingertips. I bring the glass to my lips and take a slow, deliberate sip, letting the cool liquid soothe my throat. I set the glass back down on the table, placing it precisely on the woven linen coaster. I look up, meeting Trent's arrogant, expectant gaze. I smile. That is a very impressive signature, Trent, I say, my voice echoing with a terrifying, unwavering certainty. It is a beautiful piece of work, almost perfect. But you made one fatal mistake. Trent lets out a harsh burst of laughter, but it sounds incredibly hollow this time. He shifts his weight, crossing his arms over his chest as he looks down at me. What mistake? He demands, his voice cracking just a fraction of an inch. There is no mistake, Jada. That document is bulletproof. The notary is real. The filing is real. Stop bluffing and transfer the assets right now. My father nods, stepping closer to the table to reinforce Trent's fragile authority. You always did watch too many movies, Jada Calvin says, trying to sound like the voice of reason. Just sign the digital transfers. The longer you drag this out, the worse it is going to be for your reputation and your business. I do not reach for my phone just yet. I let the silence stretch out, allowing the absolute arrogance of these two men to hang in the air for everyone to see. I look at my mother, Vivian, who is clutching her wine glass so tightly. Her knuckles have turned a pale ash gray. She senses that the ground is shifting beneath her feet, but she does not know which way to run. I lean back in my chair, resting my hands comfortably in my lap. I look around the beautifully decorated private dining suite, taking in the rich mahogany paneled walls, the heavy velvet drapery, and the stunning custom-built crystal chandelier hanging directly over the center of our table. You see, Trent, I begin, my voice echoing softly against the acoustic paneling of the room you walked into this building, thinking it was just a fancy place to get a free meal. You thought the obsidian room was nothing more than a pretty backdrop for you to flex your fabricated wealth, but you do not understand the luxury hospitality business at all. I stand up slowly, smoothing out the front of my dress. I walk around the edge of the table, moving with absolute purpose. The extended family tracks my every movement, their eyes wide with growing apprehension. When I built this restaurant, I did not just build a dining room. I continue walking until I am standing just a few feet away from Trent. I built a sanctuary. The people who book this specific private suite are not just wealthy. They are the Atlanta elite. They are politicians, sitting judges, platinum-selling, recording artists, and corporate executives making multi-million-dollar handshake deals over Wagyu beef. When you cater to that level of clientele, your absolute highest priority is security. Trent frowns. His eyes dart around the room, suddenly paranoid. What are you talking about? He snaps his arms, dropping to his sides. I raise my right hand and point a single polished fingernail straight up toward the ceiling. I point directly at the massive glittering crystal chandelier hanging right above the forged document he just slammed onto my table. Look closely, Trent, I instruct him. Right in the center tier, hidden between the teardrop crystals. Trent slowly tilts his head back. Calvin follows his gaze. Even Kendra leans forward, squinting up at the glowing fixture, nestled perfectly into the ornate brass framework of the chandelier, completely invisible. Unless you know exactly where to look, is a tiny, unblinking red light. It glows with a steady, terrifying permanence. That red light belongs to a state-of-the-art, high-define, wide-angle security lens. I say, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous pitch, and it is wired with a military-grade omnidirectional microphone. Trent's face loses every single ounce of color. The arrogant flush of his cheeks vanishes, leaving behind a sickening pale white. He stumbles back half a step, bumping into Kendra's chair. You cannot record people without their consent. Calvin shouts, his voice trembling with sudden raw panic. That is illegal, Jada. You are breaking the law. I laugh. It is a genuine, joyful sound that cuts through his desperate blustering. I am not breaking any laws, Calvin, I reply smoothly. If you had bothered to read the brass plaque mounted right next to the entrance of this private suite, or the waiver printed at the bottom of the reservation confirmation email, you would know that entering this VIP room constitutes explicit consent to video and audio recording for security purposes. My lawyers drafted that policy 3 years ago. It is completely ironclad. The extended family breaks into a frenzy of panicked whispers. My aunts and uncles, who were silently cheering for my downfall just moments ago, are now looking around the room in absolute terror. They realize they are sitting inside a fully wired surveillance box. They realize they have just been complicit witnesses to a massive corporate crime. Uncle David practically pushes his chair back against the wall, trying to distance himself from the center of the room. Kendra grabs Trent's arm, her manicured fingers digging into the fabric of his tailored suit jacket. Trent, what does that mean? She asks, her voice pitched high and tight with hysteria. What is she saying? Trent does not answer her. He cannot speak. He is staring at that tiny red light, like it is the eye of a predator, and he is the prey caught completely out in the open. His breathing becomes shallow and rapid. The realization of what he just did on hide camera is destroying him from the inside out. I reach into my pocket and pull out my smartphone. I unlock the screen with a quick swipe of my thumb and open the encrypted security application my tech team built specifically for this restaurant. The app connects directly to the private servers housed in the basement of the building. I tap the screen a few times, pulling up the live camera feed from the chandelier. I hold the phone out, turning the bright screen so Trent, Calvin, and Vivian can all see it perfectly. On the screen, they see a crystal-clear overhead view of the entire dining table. They see the empty lobster shells. They see the wine glasses. And right in the center of the frame, in stunning resolution, they see the forged legal document resting exactly where Trent slammed it down. I drag my finger across the playback bar, rewinding the footage by exactly 4 minutes. I press play and turn the volume all the way up. The audio quality is absolutely flawless. Trent's aggressive, grating voice echoes out of my phone speakers, filling the silent room. You signed your business over to your parents years ago as collateral for a family loan. The digital Trent boasts on the recording his privilege on full display. Your father and I filed the transfer paperwork yesterday morning. We own your firm. We own the mortgage. We own you. I hit pause, stopping the video on the exact frame where Trent is pointing his finger in my face while Calvin stands next to him, grinning like a victorious thief. I lower the phone and look at the three of them watching their entire world shatter into a million irreparable pieces. Which means I say, my voice ringing with total absolute authority. This camera just recorded you, Trent, and you, Calvin. explicitly admitting to extortion and presenting a forged legal document to seize a multi-million-dollar corporation. Trent lets out a harsh burst of laughter. He shifts his weight and crosses his arms over his chest, looking down at me with absolute contempt. "What mistake?" he demands, his voice cracking just a fraction of an inch. "There is no mistake, Jada. That document is bulletproof. The notary is real. The filing is real. Stop bluffing and transfer the assets right now." My father nods, stepping closer to the table to reinforce Trent's fragile authority. "You always did watch too many movies," Jada Calvin says, trying to sound like the voice of reason. "Just sign the digital transfers. The longer you drag this out, the worse it is going to be for your reputation and your business." I do not reach for my phone just yet. I let the silence stretch out, allowing the absolute arrogance of these two men to hang in the air for everyone to see. I look at my mother, Vivian, who is clutching her wine glass so tightly her knuckles have turned a pale ash gray. She senses that the ground is shifting beneath her feet, but she does not know which way to run. I lean back in my chair, resting my hands comfortably in my lap. I look around the beautifully decorated private dining suite, taking in the rich mahogany-paneled walls, the heavy velvet drapery, and the stunning custom-built crystal chandelier hanging directly over the center of our table. "You see, Trent," I begin, my voice echoing softly against the acoustic paneling of the room. "You walked into this building thinking it was just a fancy place to get a free meal. You thought the Obsidian Room was nothing more than a pretty backdrop for you to flex your fabricated wealth in front of my family. But you do not understand the luxury hospitality business at all." I stand up slowly, smoothing out the front of my dress. I walk around the edge of the table, moving with absolute purpose. The extended family tracks my every movement, their eyes wide with growing apprehension. When I built this restaurant, I did not just build a dining room. I continue walking until I am standing just a few feet away from Trent. I built a sanctuary. The people who book this specific private suite are not just wealthy. They are the Atlanta elite. They are state politicians, sitting judges, platinum-selling recording artists, and corporate executives making multi-million-dollar handshake deals over Wagyu beef. When you cater to that level of clientele, your absolute highest priority is security. Trent frowns. His eyes dart around the room, suddenly paranoid. "What are you talking about?" He snaps his arms, dropping to his sides. I raise my right hand and point a single polished fingernail straight up toward the ceiling. I point directly at the massive, glittering crystal chandelier hanging right above the forged document he just slammed onto my table. "Look closely, Trent," I instruct him. Right in the center tier, hidden between the teardrop crystals. Trent slowly tilts his head back. Calvin follows his gaze. Even Kendra leans forward, squinting up at the glowing fixture, nestled perfectly into the ornate brass framework of the chandelier, completely invisible. Unless you know exactly where to look, is a tiny, unblinking red light. It glows with a steady, terrifying permanence. That red light belongs to a state-of-the-art, high-defin, wide-angle security lens, I say, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous pitch, and it is wired with a militaried omnidirectional microphone. Trent's face loses every single ounce of color. The arrogant flush of his cheeks vanishes, leaving behind a sickening pale white. He stumbles back half a step, bumping into Kendra's chair. "You cannot record people without their consent," Calvin shouts, his voice trembling with sudden raw panic. "That is illegal, Jada. You are breaking the law." I laugh. It is a genuine, joyful sound that cuts through his desperate blustering. "I am not breaking any laws, Calvin," I reply smoothly. "If you had bothered to read the solid brass plaque mounted right next to the entrance of this private suite, or the liability waiver printed at the very bottom of your reservation confirmation email, you would know that entering this VIP room constitutes explicit consent to video and audio recording for security purposes. My corporate lawyers drafted that policy 3 years ago. It is completely ironclad." The extended family breaks into a frenzy of panicked whispers. My aunts and uncles, who were silently cheering for my downfall just moments ago, are now looking around the room in absolute terror. They realize they are sitting inside a fully wired surveillance box. They realize they have just been complicit witnesses to a massive corporate crime. Uncle David practically pushes his heavy chair back against the wall, trying to distance himself from the center of the room. Kendra grabs Trent's arm, her manicured fingers digging into the expensive fabric of his tailored suit jacket. "Trent, what does that mean?" she asks, her voice pitched high and tight with hysteria. What is she saying? Trent does not answer her. He cannot speak. He is staring at that tiny red light like it is the eye of a predator, and he is the prey caught completely out in the open. His breathing becomes shallow and rapid. The realization of what he just did on high-def camera is destroying him from the inside out. I reach into my pocket and pull out my smartphone. I unlock the screen with a quick swipe of my thumb and open the encrypted security application my tech team built specifically for this restaurant. The app connects directly to the private servers housed in the basement of the building. I tap the screen a few times, pulling up the live camera feed from the chandelier. I hold the phone out, turning the bright screen so Trent, Calvin, and Vivian can all see it perfectly. On the screen, they see a crystal-clear overhead view of the entire dining table. They see the empty lobster shells. They see the half-empty wine glasses. And right in the center of the frame, in stunning high resolution, they see the forged legal document resting exactly where Trent slammed it down. I drag my finger across the playback bar, rewinding the footage by exactly 4 minutes. I press play and turn the volume all the way up. The audio quality is absolutely flawless. Trent's aggressive, grating voice echoes out of my phone speakers, filling the silent room. You signed your business over to your parents years ago as collateral for a family loan. The digital Trent boasts on the recording his white privilege on full display. Your father and I filed the transfer paperwork yesterday morning. We own your firm. We own the mortgage. We own you. I hit pause, stopping the video on the exact frame where Trent is pointing his finger in my face while Calvin stands next to him, grinning like a victorious thief. I lower the phone and look at the three of them watching their entire world shatter into a million irreparable pieces. Which means I say, my voice ringing with total absolute authority. This camera just recorded you, Trent, and you, Calvin, explicitly admitting to extortion and presenting a forged legal document to seize a multi-million-dollar corporation. Trent shakes his head rapidly, desperately trying to find a way out of the corner he painted himself into. A video of a piece of paper does not prove anything. Jada, he stammers his voice, completely losing its commanding edge. The document is still notarized. The signature is still yours. You cannot prove it is a fake just because we bragged about it on camera. I smile again. I was hoping he would try to deny it. I walk back over to my side of the table and pick up the second thick black legal folder that Julian brought me. I do not even look at the forged document on the table. It is entirely worthless to me. You are absolutely right, Trent, I say, opening the black folder and pulling out a thick stack of printed emails and financial ledgers. A security video does not prove the document is a forgery, but my cybersecurity team certainly does. I slide the top page across the table toward him. It is a printed transcript of an encrypted email chain. You see, Trent, when you are the CEO of a private equity firm that manages billions of dollars in luxury assets, you do not just hire regular IT guys. You hire former federal cybersecurity analysts. And my team flagged your IP address 3 weeks ago when you started poking around my corporate filings. Trent stares at the paper on the table. His chest is heaving. They tracked your digital footprint. I continue, my voice relentless and sharp. Do you know how incredibly stupid you have to be to use your own corporate laptop to access the dark web? We watched you navigate to a black market forum. We intercepted the exact messages you sent to a professional forger based out of Eastern Europe. I slide another document across the table. This one is a bank statement. I have the digital paper trail of the entire transaction. I have the offshore wire transfer receipts linking directly back to your personal checking account. I even have the exact timestamp of when the digital proof of the forgery was sent back to your email inbox. You paid $12,000 for that fake signature, Trent, and you left a digital trail so wide and so bright it practically spells out your guilt in neon letters. Calvin looks down at the papers on the table. His hands start to shake uncontrollably. The reality of his impending destruction is finally crashing through his thick wall of arrogance. He looks at me, his eyes wide, with a profound, terrifying realization. You set us up, Calvin whispers, his voice cracking with horror. You knew about the forgery before we even got here. You invited us to this dinner to destroy us. I look at the man who stole my college tuition. The man who forced me to sleep in my car during the freezing Atlanta winter. The man who demanded I pay a $5,000 dinner bill just to humiliate me. I did not set you up, Dad, I reply coldly. I invited you to dinner. You brought the forgery and the extortion all on your own. I simply provided the lighting and the camera. I press a single button on my phone. Outside the private dining room, Heavy, purposeful footsteps approach down the velvet-lined hallway. The brass handles of the heavy mahogany doors turn. The doors swing open violently, hitting the wall stops with a loud thud. It is not Julian arriving with the dessert menu. Two uniformed detectives from the Atlanta Police Department step into the private suite. Their badges gleam under the crystal chandelier. Flanking them is a tall, severe-looking woman carrying a briefcase. She is my lead corporate attorney, and she looks absolutely merciless. The game is officially over. I look at the man sitting at the head of the table. I look at the man who drained my college savings, who watched me face homelessness without lifting a single finger to help. I look at the man who thought he could use my hard-earned success to fund his failing lifestyle. I did not set you up, Calvin, I reply, my voice perfectly steady and cold. I invited you to a dinner. You brought the forgery and the extortion all on your own. I simply provided the lighting and the camera. I look down at my smartphone, still resting in the palm of my hand. I press a single button on the screen. Outside the private dining room, heavy, purposeful footsteps approach down the velvet-lined hallway. The brass handles of the heavy mahogany doors turn. The doors swing open violently, hitting the wall stops with a loud, echoing thud. It is not Julian arriving with the dessert menu. Two uniformed detectives from the Atlanta Police Department step into the private suite. Their silver badges gleam under the bright light of the crystal chandelier. Flanking them is a tall, severe-looking woman carrying a thick leather briefcase. She is my lead corporate attorney, Miranda, and she looks absolutely merciless. The game is officially over. Absolute chaos erupts inside the dining room. The 15 extended family members who gladly sat in complete silence while I was being emotionally abused suddenly realized the sheer gravity of what is happening. The aunts and uncles, who were hoping for a free luxury meal, now scrambled desperately to the far edges of the room. They pushed their heavy wooden chairs out of the way, trying to physically distance themselves from Calvin and Trent. Uncle David practically presses his back against the mahogany wall, holding his hands up in the air as if to prove he has nothing to do with the forged documents on the table. They are terrified. They know they have just been complicit witnesses to a massive corporate crime, and nobody wants to go down with a sinking ship. Miranda steps forward, cutting right through the panicked whispers of the extended family. She walks with the absolute authority of a woman who destroys fraudulent corporations for a living. She stops directly in front of Trent and Kendra. She reaches into her leather briefcase and pulls out a thick manila envelope. She holds the envelope out. Trent is too frozen and shocked to take it, so Miranda drops it squarely onto his empty porcelain dining plate. "You have officially been served," Miranda announces, her voice sharp and uncompromising. "These are formal foreclosure papers for the residential property located in Buckhead. Because this mortgage was secured through verified federal wire fraud and deliberate income inflation, the standard grace periods do not apply. You have exactly 72 hours to vacate the premises before the locks are changed and your remaining possessions are seized." Kendra lets out a loud, hysterical gasp. Her perfectly manicured facade crumbles instantly. The reality of losing her entire fabricated socialite lifestyle crashes down on her all at once. She reaches out and grabs her expensive designer handbag, clutching it to her chest, as if the leather can somehow shield her from the devastating consequences of her own greed. She starts sobbing openly, her makeup smearing down her cheeks. I walk over to the lead detective. I hand him the iPad containing the fully downloaded security footage from the last 30 minutes. I also hand him the thick black folder containing the digital paper trail of the dark web transaction, the wire transfer receipts, and the exact timestamp the forgery was created. "The evidence is all there, officer," I say quietly. The lead detective nods, taking the items from me. He turns his attention to the dining table. He gestures to his partner and they move in. "Trenton Hayes and Calvin Brooks," the detective says, reciting their full legal names. "Please stand up and place your hands behind your backs." Trent immediately tries to resist. His ingrained white privilege blinds him to the absolute reality of his situation. He refuses to stand up. He points an angry, shaking finger at the detective. "Do you know who I am?" Trent shouts, his voice cracking with desperation. "You cannot do this. I play golf with the district attorney. This is a massive misunderstanding. My sister-in-law is just confused about a family business loan." The detective is not moved in the slightest. He reaches down, grabs Trent by the arm, and hauls him forcefully out of the plush dining chair. He spins Trent around and kicks his legs apart. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs echoes through the silent room as they are secured tightly around Trent's wrists. I said, "Place your hands behind your back," the detective repeats coldly. "You are being detained on suspicion of attempted fraud, felony extortion, and presenting forged legal documents. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it." Calvin does not fight back. He knows it is completely useless. The arrogance has been entirely drained out of him. He stands up slowly, his shoulders slumped in defeat, and allows the second officer to place the heavy steel handcuffs on his wrists. The man who always needed to be the most powerful person in the room has been reduced to a common criminal waiting for processing. Watching her husband and her golden son-in-law being arrested pushes Vivian completely over the edge. She realizes that her entire world, her country club status, her fake wealth, her arrogant superiority, is gone forever. Vivian drops to her knees right there on the polished hardwood floor. She crawls toward me, abandoning every single ounce of her pride. She reaches out and grabs the hem of my dress, her fingers twisting the expensive fabric. "Jada, baby. Please, Vivian." So her voice high and ragged. "Please do not do this. Do not destroy this family over money. We can fix this. We can talk about it. Please tell them to let your father go." I look down at the woman who birthed me. I look at the woman who laughed when I had to drop out of Spelman College. I look at the woman who demanded I pay over $5,000 just to humiliate me in front of relatives. I feel absolutely nothing for her. No pity, no sadness, just a profound hollow emptiness where a daughter's love used to reside. I reach down and firmly pry her trembling fingers off the fabric of my dress. I step back, creating a clear, physical, and emotional boundary between us. "You destroyed this family 15 years ago when you stole my future, Vivian." I say my words dropping like heavy stones in the quiet room. "You stole my education to fund your fake lifestyle. You threw me out onto the street and told everyone I was a massive failure. I did not destroy anything today. I just built a better life without you, and you could not stand it." The detectives grip Calvin and Trent by the arms and begin marching them toward the heavy mahogany doors. Kendra follows closely behind them, still weeping hysterically, clutching her designer bag like a life preserver. Vivian remains on the floor, sobbing into her hands, her perfect image completely shattered in front of the entire extended family. As the police escort the men out of the room, Julian, the general manager, quietly steps back inside the private dining suite. He moves with the same impeccable professional grace as before, but this time he is not empty-handed. In his hands, he holds a highly polished silver tray. The final piece of business remains unfinished. Julian moves with silent precision. His highly polished leather shoes make no sound against the hardwood floor of the private dining suite. He steps gracefully around my weeping mother, who is still trembling on the ground. He bypasses the empty chairs where my father and brother-in-law sat just moments before they were escorted out in handcuffs. Julian stops directly in front of Kendra, who is clutching her designer bag to her chest like a protective shield. With a smooth, practiced motion, Julian lowers the silver tray. Resting right in the center of the polished metal is the heavy black leather check folder. It is the exact same folder Calvin arrogantly slid across the mahogany table at the very beginning of the evening. Julian picks up the folder and places it squarely on the table right between my mother and my sister. Vivian slowly pulls herself up from the floor. Her expensive dress is wrinkled, and her perfectly styled hair is now a disheveled mess. She looks at the black leather folder with wide, bloodshot eyes. Kendra stops her hysterical sobbing for just a second, staring at the check like it is a venomous snake. "What is this?" Vivian asks, her voice raspy and broken. She looks up at me, her expression a pathetic mixture of confusion and lingering entitlement. "You said this meal was handled, Jada. You said it was completely comped because you own the restaurant." I stand tall looking down at the two women who made my childhood a living nightmare. I did say that I reply my voice perfectly calm and devoid of any sympathy. But as the sole owner and chief executive of this hospitality group, I maintain absolute discretion over all complimentary services. It is a strict corporate policy to immediately revoke any and all comps in cases of hostile conduct, verbal abuse, or attempted criminal extortion on the premises. I gesture toward the black folder resting on the table. "Your comp has been officially canceled, Vivian," I state clearly. The final total for the Wagyu steaks, the butter-poached lobster, and the 3 bottles of vintage crystal champagne comes out to exactly $5,240, and the bill is now due in full. Kendra lets out another loud, dramatic gasp. She shakes her head wildly, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light of the chandelier one last time. "We do not have that kind of cash on us, Jada." She cries, her voice pitching up into a frantic whine. "Trent handles all the finances. Trent has all the credit cards. You just had my husband arrested. How are we supposed to pay for this? That sounds like a personal financial problem." "Kendra," I say, matching her frantic energy with absolute chilling stillness. "But you are the golden child of this family. You are the one who belongs in Buckethead. You are the respectable, polished face of success. Surely, a $5,000 dinner bill is nothing but pocket change for someone with your incredible social status." Vivian reaches out with a shaking hand and grabs the edge of the table to steady herself. "Jada, please." She begs, her voice cracking. "We cannot pay this right now. You have taken our house. You have taken my husband. Do not humiliate us like this in front of the rest of the family." I look past her to the remaining aunts, uncles, and cousins. They are all standing silently near the walls, entirely unwilling to step forward and help. Nobody is reaching for their wallets to bail out the matriarch. The illusion of Vivian's power is completely dead, and her loyal subjects have rapidly abandoned ship. "I did not humiliate you, Vivian. I say my words sharp and absolute. You humiliated yourselves. You ordered a feast you could not afford because you thought you could force your scapegoat daughter to foot the bill. Now you are going to face the consequences of your own gluttony." I turn my attention to Julian, who is standing patiently by the door. If this bill is not settled in full before these 2 women attempt to leave the building, Julian instructs him loud enough for the entire room to hear. "You are to call the Atlanta Police Department back immediately. You will have them formally charged with theft of services, and they can join Calvin and Trent in holding cells for the night." Julian gives a crisp, respectful nod. "Understood completely, Miss Brooks," he says. The panic in the room reaches a fever pitch. Vivian and Kendra finally realize that I am not bluffing. There is no rescue coming. There is no second chance. They scramble back to their chairs, frantically ripping open their expensive designer purses. Kendra dumps the contents of her bag directly onto the mahogany table. Lipsticks, compact mirrors, and gold-plated keychains scatter across the wood. She pulls out a handful of credit cards, her hands shaking violently as she sorts through them. She hands 3 different cards to Julian, her voice a pathetic whisper. "Try these," she begs him. "Put 1,000 on the blue one and split the rest between the other 2. Please just make it go through." Vivian is digging through her own purse, pulling out crumpled $100 bills and tossing them onto the silver tray. The elegant, sophisticated women who walked into my restaurant demanding respect are now reduced to scraping together maxed-out credit cards just to pay for the lobster they thought they were eating for free. It is a beautiful, agonizing reality to witness. They are completely stripped of their false wealth, their toxic men, and their unearned pride. I do not wait around to watch Julian run the transactions. I have seen exactly what I came here to see. I turn my back on the absolute wreckage of my former family. I do not say goodbye. I do not offer a single parting word of advice. I simply walk away. I step out of the private dining suite, and the heavy mahogany doors close firmly behind me, sealing the toxicity inside. The main dining room of the Obsidian Room is bustling with energy. But the moment I step into the corridor, the restaurant staff parts for me respectfully. Waiters, hosts, and managers give me polite nods as I glide past them, moving with the quiet power of a woman who fully controls her own destiny. I push through the heavy glass front doors of the restaurant and step out into the warm, humid Atlanta night. The air smells like rain and blooming jasmine. The valet immediately signals my driver, and a sleek black car pulls up to the curb within seconds. My chauffeur steps out and holds the rear door open for me. I slide into the luxurious leather back seat, and the door closes with a satisfying heavy thud. The quiet hum of the engine completely isolates me from the chaos I just left behind. I lean my head back against the plush headrest and look out the tinted window as the car pulls seamlessly away from the curb. I watch the glowing neon sign of my restaurant fade into the distance. My chest feels incredibly light. For 15 years, I carried the heavy, suffocating weight of their rejection. I let their cruel words dictate my worth, and their theft define my struggle. But tonight, I finally set that heavy burden down right in the middle of their dinner plates. I am totally and completely free. My empire is secure. My peace is absolute. I take a deep breath of the cool air circulating through the car, and for the first time in my entire life, I look forward to tomorrow. The heavy mahogany doors slamming open acts like a starting gun. Absolute chaos erupts inside the private dining suite. Just moments ago, 15 extended family members were sitting in comfortable silence while I was being emotionally abused. They were perfectly happy to drink my expensive champagne and laugh at my expense. Now the sheer gravity of what is happening hits them all at once. The sight of the Atlanta Police Department detectives standing shoulder to shoulder with my corporate attorney shatters their collective delusion. They suddenly realize they are sitting in the middle of an active crime scene, and nobody wants to be collateral damage. Panic is a highly contagious disease, and my family catches it instantly. My aunts and uncles, who were just hoping for a free luxury meal, scrambled desperately to the far edges of the room. They push their heavy wooden dining chairs out of the way with violent force. Crystal wine glasses tip over, spilling expensive red wine across the pristine white tablecloth like fresh blood. They do not care about the mess. They only care about creating physical distance between themselves and my father. They press their backs flat against the mahogany-paneled walls, trying to make themselves completely invisible to the detectives. Aunt Sheila, who spent the entire appetizer course whispering loudly about my lack of a husband, actually tries to hide behind the heavy velvet window drapes. Uncle David, who was cheering for Trent just 10 minutes ago, holds his hands high up in the air. He shakes his head rapidly, silently, signaling to the police officers that he has absolutely nothing to do with the forged documents resting on the table. It is a pathetic display of cowardice, but it is exactly what I expected. The unbreakable family loyalty they preach about so loudly evaporates the very second real consequences enter the room. Nobody is stepping up to defend my father. Nobody is shielding Trent. They are entirely focused on self-preservation. I watch them scatter like roaches caught in the light, and I feel a profound sense of validation. The toxic family foundation is rotting away in front of my eyes, and I am the one holding the spotlight. Miranda steps forward, cutting right through the panicked whispers and the frantic shuffling of my relatives. She walks with the absolute authority of a woman who dismantles fraudulent corporations for a living. Her heels click sharply against the hardwood floor, demanding total attention. She does not look at my parents. She does not look at the police officers. Her gaze is locked entirely on my sister and my brother-in-law. She stops directly in front of Trent and Kendra. Trent is still frozen, staring at the detectives. His chest heaves with shallow, rapid breaths. He cannot comprehend that his privilege is not going to protect him tonight. He has lived his entire life believing that the rules do not apply to him. But Miranda is here to deliver a very harsh reality check. Kendra is shaking violently. Her eyes dart wildly around the room, looking for an exit that does not exist. Miranda reaches into her thick leather briefcase. She pulls out a heavy manila envelope sealed with a red corporate stamp. She holds the envelope out toward Trent. He does not move his hands to take it. He is paralyzed by the sudden total collapse of his unearned authority. Miranda does not wait for him to accept it. She drops the heavy envelope squarely onto his empty porcelain dining plate. It lands with a soft thud right on top of a discarded lobster shell. Trenton and Kendra Miranda announces, her voice sharp and completely uncompromising. "You have officially been served." Trent blinks, looking down at the envelope like it might burst into flames. Served with what he manages to croak out, his voice sounding weak and incredibly small. He tries to puff out his chest to regain some semblance of control, but his hands are visibly trembling. These are formal foreclosure papers for the residential property located in Buckhead. Miranda explains, her words sliced through the humid air of the room, dismantling their lives sentence by sentence. Because this specific mortgage was secured through verified federal wire fraud, deliberate income inflation, and the submission of falsified tax returns, the standard banking grace periods absolutely do not apply to your situation. Apex Capital has initiated an immediate hostile recall of the asset. My father. Calvin steps forward, his hands raised in a desperate pleading motion. He still thinks he can negotiate his way out of a federal crime. "Now wait a minute," Calvin says, his voice cracking with panic. "You cannot just take their home. They have rights. You have to give them 30 days to figure this out. You have to follow the eviction laws." Miranda turns her severe gaze toward my father, and he immediately shrinks back. "They do not have 30 days, Calvin," Miranda states coldly. "They do not even have 30 hours of legal protection left. When you commit federal fraud to secure a luxury asset, You immediately forfeit your standard tenant rights. You breach the contract the moment you submitted fake financial records. She turns her attention back to Trent and Kendra, delivering the final devastating blow. You have exactly 72 hours to vacate the premises entirely. If you and your belongings are not completely removed from that property by Tuesday evening, the locks will be changed, the security system will be reset, and your remaining possessions will be seized and auctioned to cover the outstanding legal fees of this hostile foreclosure. The finality of Miranda's words strikes Kendra like a physical blow. The reality of losing her entire fabricated socialite lifestyle crashes down on her shoulders all at once. She is not going to be the queen of Buckhead anymore. She is not going to host charity galas or brag about her custom temperature-controlled wine cellar. She is going to be a homeless fraud facing federal charges with absolutely zero money to her name. Kendra lets out a loud, hysterical gasp. Her perfectly manicured facade crumbles instantly into a million irreparable pieces. The golden child of the family, the woman who was supposed to be better than me in every conceivable way, is entirely broken. She starts sobbing openly, her expensive makeup smearing dark streaks down her cheeks. She looks toward my mother for help, but Vivian is too terrified to even move a muscle. Left with absolutely no one to save her, Kendra reaches out with trembling hands. She grabs her expensive designer handbag from the table. She clutches the leather bag tightly to her chest, holding it like a protective shield. She curls inward, hugging the designer purse as if a luxury accessory can somehow save her from the devastating reality of her own boundless greed. She sobs into the leather, mourning the death of the fake life she built on my stolen future. I turn my attention away from my sobbing sister. I have absolutely no pity left to give her. She built her entire luxury lifestyle on the stolen foundation of my education, and now the bill has finally come due. I walk away from the table and move toward the heavy mahogany doors where the lead detective is standing. He has been watching the total collapse of my family with a quiet, professional stillness. I stop in front of him and hand over the sleek silver iPad. I place the second thick black legal folder directly on top of it. The digital paper trail for the dark web forgery is fully documented inside that folder. "Officer," I say, keeping my voice low and perfectly steady, "you will find the offshore wire transfer receipts, the intercepted encrypted communications, and the exact timestamps matching the creation of the fraudulent collateral document currently resting on my dining table. The iPad contains the fully downloaded high-definition video and audio confession from the chandelier camera. They brought the forgery into my establishment tonight with the explicit intent to extort me out of my corporate assets." The lead detective gives a firm, respectful nod, taking the evidence from my hands. He understands exactly what he is looking at. He turns to his partner, signaling that it is time to move in. They step forward, their heavy boots thudding against the polished hardwood floor, closing the distance between themselves and the two men who thought they were entirely untouchable. Trenton Hayes and Calvin Brooks, the lead detective, announces, his voice booming across the room, completely devoid of emotion. "Please stand up and place your hands behind your backs." Trent immediately recoils as if he has been physically struck. His deeply ingrained white privilege blinds him to the absolute reality of the situation unfolding in front of him. He has lived his entire life believing that consequences are reserved for other people, for lesser people, not for a wealthy man who lives in a Buckhead mansion and drinks $500 champagne. He refuses to stand up. Instead, he points a shaking, aggressive finger at the detective. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Trent shouts, his face turning a blotchy, furious shade of red. "You cannot do this to me. I play golf with the district attorney. This is a massive misunderstanding. My sister-in-law is just confused about a standard family business loan. You have absolutely no right to touch me." The detective is entirely unmoved by the tantrum. He has dealt with arrogant, wealthy criminals before, and Trent is nothing special. The officer reaches down, grabs Trent by the arm of his expensive tailored suit, and hauls him forcefully out of the plush dining chair. Trent stumbles, shouting in loud, frantic protest, but the officer spins him around with practiced ruthless efficiency. He kicks Trent's legs apart, forcing him into a vulnerable stance. The sharp, heavy metallic click of steel handcuffs echoes through the silent private dining suite as they are secured tightly around Trent's wrists. I said, "Place your hands behind your back." The detective repeats his tone, turning ice cold. "You are being detained on suspicion of attempted federal wire fraud, felony extortion, and the presentation of forged legal documents." You have the right to remain silent, and looking at the evidence against you, I strongly suggest you start using it. Trent struggles against the metal cuffs, his chest heaving with panicked breaths. He looks over his shoulder at me, his blue eyes wide with a mixture of raw terror and absolute disbelief. The man who just spent the last hour mocking my intelligence and attempting to steal my empire is now being physically restrained in the middle of a luxury restaurant. The untouchable golden son-in-law has been reduced to a common criminal. I shift my gaze to my father. Calvin does not fight back. He knows it is completely useless. The towering, intimidating arrogance has been entirely drained out of his body, leaving behind a hollow, tired old man. He stands up slowly, his shoulders slumped in total defeat. He does not argue or demand to call his lawyer. He simply turns around and allows the second police officer to pull his arms behind his back. The heavy steel cuffs lock around his wrists with a sickening finality. The man who always demanded to be the most powerful, commanding presence in any room has been entirely neutralized. He refuses to look at me. He just stares down at the polished floor. The illusion of his grand success entirely shattered in front of the very relatives he tried so desperately to impress. Watching her husband and her prized son-in-law being arrested pushes Vivian completely over the edge. She stands frozen by the table, realizing that her entire world, her country club status, her fake wealth, her arrogant superiority is gone forever. There is no coming back from a public arrest for federal fraud. The shame will follow her for the rest of her life, and she knows she has absolutely no one to blame but herself. Vivian lets out a ragged, breathless sob. The pristine, elegant matriarch facade dissolves entirely. She drops to her knees right there on the hardwood floor. She abandons every single ounce of her pride and dignity. She scrambles forward, crawling across the floor toward me. Her eyes are wide and bloodshot streaming rapidly down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. She reaches out with desperate, trembling hands and grabs the hem of my dress, clutching the fabric like her life depends on it. Vivian's manicured fingers dig into the expensive silk of my dress. She is gripping the fabric so tightly her knuckles are completely white. The woman who birthed me is kneeling on the hardwood floor of my restaurant, sobbing hysterically. Her heavy tears mix with her expensive foundation, leaving dark, ugly streaks running down her face. This is the exact same woman who barely an hour ago was elegantly swirling a glass of premium red wine. This is the woman who sat in a plush chair with a cruel, satisfied smirk on her face and loudly announced to a room full of relatives that I was nothing but a college dropout. Now that arrogant matriarch is completely gone. In her place is a terrified, desperate woman realizing that her entire world of fabricated wealth and country club status has just been utterly obliterated. "Jada, baby, please," Vivian wails, her voice cracking and echoing off the acoustic panels of the private dining suite. "Please tell them to stop. Tell the officers to let your father and your brother-in-law go. Do not do this to us. You know Calvin cannot survive in a place like that. You know Trent is the sole provider for your sister. You cannot send them to a federal prison over a simple piece of paper. We are your family. We are your blood. Blood always forgives." I look down at her. I look at the desperate, frantic expression on her face, and I realize she is still trying to manipulate the narrative. Even now, with her husband in steel handcuffs and her golden son-in-law facing federal extortion charges, she is actively trying to gaslight me. She is deliberately trying to frame this entire situation as if I am the one being unreasonable. She wants the extended family members who are still cowering against the walls to believe that I am a vindictive, ruthless daughter tearing her loving family apart over a simple financial misunderstanding. She completely ignores the undeniable fact that they walked into this building tonight with a forged legal document specifically designed to steal my entire livelihood. She ignores the fact that they just tried to extort a multi-million-dollar corporation from me to save their own skin. In her twisted mind, their massive federal crime was just a minor mistake. But my refusal to be their victim is a family-destroying betrayal. I stand perfectly still. I do not reach down to help her up. I do not offer a single word of comfort. I feel absolutely nothing for this woman. There is no lingering maternal bond pulling at my heartstrings. There is no guilt weighing down my conscience. There is only a profound, hollow emptiness where a daughter's love used to reside. The severe trauma they inflicted on me 15 years ago burned away every last ounce of affection I could have ever held for them. I reach down and firmly pry her trembling fingers off the fabric of my dress. I pull the silk out of her desperate grasp and take a deliberate step backward, creating a clear, impenetrable physical boundary between us. You destroyed this family 15 years ago, Vivian, I say. My voice is quiet, but it rings with a terrifying clarity that silences her hysterical sobbing. The entire room holds its breath, listening to the absolute truth finally being spoken out loud. You destroyed us the very moment you decided my future was entirely expendable. I continue refusing to break eye contact. You stole the college trust fund my grandmother left specifically for me. You drained my education account to pay for Kendra and Trent's lavish lifestyle and to bail out Calvin's pathetic business failures. You threw your youngest daughter out onto the street with absolutely nothing. You forced me to sleep in my car during the freezing Atlanta winter while you paraded around the city, pretending to be high society royalty. Vivian opens her mouth to offer some pathetic excuse, but I do not let her speak. I step closer, forcing her to look at the successful, powerful black woman she tried so hard to break. I did not destroy anything today. I tell her, the words dropping like heavy stones onto the polished floor. I did not force Trent to commit federal wire fraud. I did not force Calvin to conspire to commit extortion. They made those choices entirely on their own because their immense arrogance convinced them they were completely untouchable. I just built a better life without you. I built a massive empire with my own 2 hands, and you simply could not stand the fact that I survived the destruction you planned for me. Vivian stares up at me, her mouth hanging open in silent shock. She finally realizes that there are no buttons left for her to push. She cannot guilt-trip me. She cannot shame me. She has absolutely zero power over me. She slowly slumps backwards, sitting on the floor in a heap of ruined silk and shattered pride. Her loud weeping becomes a quiet, defeated whimper. I turn my attention away from her and look directly at the lead detective. I give him a firm, decisive nod. The detective tightens his grip on Trent's expensive suit jacket. "Let us go," the officer commands. He and his partner begin physically marching the 2 men toward the heavy mahogany doors of the private suite. Trent tries to dig his expensive leather shoes into the hardwood floor, desperately attempting to stall his inevitable exit. He looks back at Kendra, who is still huddled in her dining chair, clutching her designer bag and sobbing uncontrollably. "Call my lawyer," Kendra Trent shouts, his voice cracking with raw panic. "Call the firm right now and tell them to post bail. Do not just sit there crying." But Kendra cannot even look at him. She knows they have no money to post bail. She knows their accounts are going to be permanently frozen by tomorrow morning. The golden couple is entirely finished. Calvin does not say a single word as he is escorted out. The towering, intimidating patriarch has been completely hollowed out. He keeps his head down, refusing to make eye contact with any of the aunts, uncles, or cousins who are watching his humiliating departure. The extended family members remain pressed against the walls, completely silent, terrified that any sudden movement might draw my attention toward them. The detectives pull Calvin and Trent out into the velvet-lined hallway. The heavy mahogany doors close behind them with a solid, echoing thud, effectively sealing my toxic father and brother-in-law out of my life forever. The private dining room is left in a state of absolute devastation. Vivian remains crumpled on the floor, weeping into her hands. Kendra continues to cry into her designer handbag, mourning the permanent loss of her fake luxury lifestyle. The leftover lobster shells, the empty Wagyu steak boards, and the half-empty champagne glasses sit on the massive table. They are a stark, ugly reminder of the arrogant feast my family thought they were getting for free. I take a deep, cleansing breath. The toxic energy that has suffocated me for my entire life is finally dissipating. I am ready to walk out of this room and leave the wreckage of this family behind me. But the heavy mahogany doors silently swing open one more time. Julian, my impeccably dressed general manager, quietly steps back inside the private dining suite. He moves with the same flawless professional grace he has maintained all evening. He completely bypasses the terrified relatives standing by the walls. He steps smoothly around my weeping mother on the floor. In his hands, he holds a highly polished silver serving tray. And resting right in the exact center of that gleaming metal surface is a very familiar item. Julian moves with silent, flawless precision. His highly polished leather shoes make no sound against the hardwood floor of the private dining suite. He navigates the absolute wreckage of my family with the steady poise of a seasoned diplomat walking through a war zone. He bypasses the empty chairs where my father and brother-in-law sat just moments before they were escorted out in handcuffs. He steps smoothly around the overturned wine glasses and the spilled dark red wine staining the pristine white tablecloth. He stops directly at the head of the massive table. With a smooth, practiced motion, Julian lowers the polished silver tray. Resting right in the exact center of the gleaming metal surface is the heavy black leather check folder. It is the exact same folder Calvin arrogantly slid across this mahogany table an hour ago with a smug, victorious smile. Julian picks up the leather folder and places it squarely on the table right between my weeping mother and my trembling sister. Vivian slowly pulls herself up from the floor, leaning heavily against the edge of the table to support her shaking legs. Her expensive designer dress is hopelessly wrinkled, and her perfectly styled hair is now a disheveled mess. She looks at the black leather folder with wide, bloodshot eyes. Her brain seems entirely unable to process what is happening. Kendra stops her hysterical sobbing for just a fraction of a second, staring at the check like it is a live, explosive device placed right in front of her face. "What is this?" Vivian asks, her voice raspy and completely stripped of its former commanding authority. She looks up at me, her expression a pathetic mixture of profound confusion and lingering toxic entitlement. "You told the entire room this dinner was comped, Jada. You stood there and said the meal was handled because you own the hospitality group." I stand tall looking down at the two women who made my entire childhood a living nightmare. I look at the women who stole my college tuition and forced me to sleep in my car during the freezing Atlanta winter. I did say that I reply my voice perfectly calm and devoid of a single ounce of sympathy. But as the sole owner and chief executive of this corporation, I retain absolute administrative discretion over all complimentary services provided within my establishments. It is a strict corporate policy to immediately revoke any and all courtesy comps in the event of hostile conduct, verbal abuse toward ownership, and most certainly in cases of attempted felony extortion on the premises. I take a deliberate step forward and gesture toward the black folder resting on the mahogany wood. "Your complimentary status has been officially revoked, Vivian." I state clearly the final total for the butter-poached lobster tails, the prime Wagyu tomahawk steaks, and the 3 bottles of vintage crystal champagne comes out to exactly $5,240, and the bill is now due in full. Kendra lets out another loud, dramatic gasp. She shakes her head wildly, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light of the crystal chandelier above us. "We do not have that kind of cash on us, Jada," she cries, her voice pitching up into a frantic, desperate whine. "Trent handles all our finances. Trent has all the primary credit cards. You just had my husband hauled out of this building in steel handcuffs. How on earth are we supposed to pay for this?" "That sounds like a severe personal financial crisis, Kendra," I say, matching her frantic energy with absolute chilling stillness. "But you just spent the last hour bragging to everyone in this room about your new $1.5 million mansion. You are the golden child of this family. You are the respectable, polished face of Buckhead High society. Surely a $5,000 dinner bill is nothing but pocket change for a woman of your incredible social standing and immense wealth." Vivian reaches out with a shaking hand clutching the leather folder. "Jada, please," she begs, her voice cracking under the crushing weight of her total humiliation. "We cannot pay this right now. You know we do not have the liquidity for this. You have taken my husband. You have taken Trent. Do not humiliate us like this in front of the rest of the family. Just let us go home and we will figure out a payment plan tomorrow." I look past my mother to the remaining aunts, uncles, and cousins. The 15 extended family members are still pressed flat against the walls of the private suite. Not a single one of them steps forward to offer assistance. Nobody is reaching into their pocket for a wallet. Nobody is offering to split the check. Uncle David suddenly finds the intricate pattern of the ceiling tiles absolutely fascinating. Aunt Sheila is looking down at her shoes, refusing to make eye contact with my mother. The very same people who happily devoured thousands of dollars worth of premium seafood while laughing at my supposed poverty are now completely silent. They were perfectly willing to let me shoulder the massive financial burden when they thought I was a struggling college dropout. But now that the bill has been handed to the matriarch, they are acting like they never ate a single bite. The illusion of Vivian's absolute power is entirely dead, and her loyal subjects have rapidly abandoned her sinking ship to save themselves. "I did not humiliate you, Vivian. I state my words sharp and definitive. You humiliated yourselves. You ordered an extravagant feast. You absolutely could not afford because you thought you could bully your scapegoat daughter into footing the bill. You thought you could use my presence here tonight to punish me and elevate your own fabricated status. Now you are going to face the immediate consequences of your own unchecked gluttony." I turn my attention back to Julian, who is standing patiently by the heavy wooden doors, waiting for my final command. "Julian," I instruct him, making sure my voice carries clearly across the silent room, so every single relative hears the final condition. If this bill is not settled in full before these two women attempt to leave the building, you are to step outside and call the Atlanta Police Department officers back inside immediately. You will have Vivian and Kendra formally charged with theft of services, and they can join Calvin and Trent in the holding cells downtown for the night. Julian gives a crisp, deeply respectful nod. Understood completely. Miss Brooks, he says, his professional tone cutting through the remaining tension in the room like a perfectly sharpened blade. I will process the payments at the table and notify security to secure the exits until the transaction is fully approved. The absolute panic inside the private dining suite reaches a fever pitch. Vivian and Kendra finally realize that I am not bluffing. There is no last-minute rescue coming from the extended family. There is no hidden grace period. There is no negotiating with the woman they spent decades trying to destroy. They scramble back to their heavy dining chairs, frantic and terrified. They rip open their expensive designer purses, dumping the contents directly onto the mahogany table. Lipsticks, compact mirrors, and gold-plated keychains scatter across the wood, mixing with the discarded lobster shells and spilled wine. They are searching desperately for any piece of plastic that has not already been maxed out to fund their fake luxury lifestyle. Julian stands at the head of the table, like an immovable force of nature. He does not flinch as my mother and sister dissolve into a state of absolute frantic panic. Vivian and Kendra are entirely stripped of the men they relied on for their power and their false wealth. They are left completely exposed in the middle of the very room they thought they conquered. I stand back and watch the beautiful, agonizing reality set in. The heavy black leather check folder rests on the polished mahogany table, demanding exactly $5,240. There is no escape. The aunts and uncles who gladly ate the butter-poached lobster and the Wagyu beef are practically pressing themselves into the wallpaper, trying to become invisible. Not a single one of them steps forward to offer $1. Kendra is the first to completely break. She lets out a frustrated sobbing sound and grabs her pristine pink Chanel bag. She tips it upside down and empties the entire contents directly onto the table right next to the discarded lobster shells and spilled red wine. Lipsticks, a compact mirror, and a gold-plated keychain scatter across the wood. She frantically digs her manicured fingers into the pile, searching for anything of value. She pulls out a silver credit card and thrusts it toward Julian. Her hands shaking so violently she nearly drops it. "Try this one," she begs him, her voice a pathetic whisper. "Put 1,000 on this one and I will find another card for the rest. Just please make it go through before they take Trent to the county jail." Julian takes the card with a polite nod and pulls a handheld payment terminal from his jacket pocket. He inserts the card. We all watch the small digital screen. It processes for exactly 3 seconds before letting out a sharp, harsh beep. Beep. Declined. Julian says, his voice perfectly neutral. Kendra gasps, grabbing her hair. She starts digging through her scattered belongings again, pulling out 2 more cards. Vivian realizes that her golden child cannot save them. The matriarch of the family, the woman who has spent her entire life projecting an image of flawless aristocratic wealth, is forced to participate in the humiliation. Vivian grabs her oversized Birkin bag and begins frantically ripping through the compartments. She pulls out a wrinkled $50 bill, a few 20s, and a handful of loose change, tossing them onto the polished silver serving tray. It is a pathetic, desperate display. I watch the 2 women pulling together their maxed-out credit cards and crumpled cash just to pay for the extravagant meal they ordered to celebrate my supposed downfall. They thought they were eating for free. They thought they were punishing me. Instead, they are literally paying the price for their own unchecked gluttony. Vivian hands Julian another card, begging him to run it for just $500. When that one declines, she hands him another, asking him to try for $200. The mighty matriarch is reduced to begging a restaurant manager to split a luxury dinner bill across a half-dozen overdrawn accounts. I realize in this exact moment that I do not need to stay here and watch them finish. I do not need to see the final receipt print out. The victory is already absolute, and my presence in this room is no longer required. The toxic hold they had on my spirit has been completely severed. I turn my back on the absolute wreckage of my former family. I do not say a single word of goodbye. I do not offer them a parting piece of advice or a final gloating remark. They are entirely beneath my notice now. I begin walking toward the heavy mahogany doors of the private dining suite. My footsteps are steady and measured, echoing softly against the acoustic wood paneling. I do not look over my shoulder. I leave them exactly where they belong, trapped in a prison of their own making, surrounded by the unpaid bills of their fabricated lifestyle and the terrified silence of their cowardly relatives. I push the heavy doors open and step out into the velvet-lined hallway. The moment the door closed behind me, the frantic sounds of my mother and sister begging Julian are instantly silenced. The thick wood seals the toxicity inside, leaving me in the quiet, sophisticated atmosphere of my own establishment. I walk down the hallway toward the main dining room. The restaurant is bustling with vibrant energy. Soft jazz music plays from the overhead speakers, and the low murmur of elegant conversations fills the air. As I move through the space, the restaurant staff parts for me respectfully. Waiters carrying silver trays step aside, giving me polite deferential nods. The hostess smiles brightly as I pass the front desk. They do not know the details of what just happened in the private suite, but they recognize the quiet, powerful authority radiating from me. I am not a frightened college dropout sneaking through the shadows. I am the owner. I am the chief executive. I am the woman who built this empire from the ground up, and every single person in this building respects the ground I walk on. I push through the heavy glass front doors of the obsidian room and step out into the warm, humid Atlanta night. The transition from the cool, climate-controlled restaurant to the warm evening air feels like a physical embrace. The air smells like impending rain and blooming jasmine, a scent that has always reminded me of survival and growth. The city lights glow softly against the dark sky, and the distant sound of downtown traffic creates a steady, comforting rhythm. The valet immediately spots me and signals my driver. Within seconds, my sleek, black chauffeur-driven luxury sedan pulls up to the curb. The vehicle is a massive, imposing presence, reflecting the streetlights off its pristine, dark paint. My driver steps out immediately and opens the heavy rear door for me. He gives me a warm, respectful nod, recognizing that the evening has been a success. "Good evening, Miss Brooks," he says quietly, holding the door wide open. "Good evening," I reply, returning his nod. "Take us home, please." I slide into the spacious, luxurious back seat of the car. The soft, premium leather yields perfectly beneath me. My driver closes the door with a satisfying, heavy thud. The moment the door seals shut, the ambient noise of the busy Atlanta street is completely erased. The thick soundproof glass and the reinforced doors of the vehicle isolate me entirely from the chaos of the outside world. The quiet hum of the powerful engine starting up is the only sound in the cabin. I lean my head back against the plush leather headrest and let out a long, slow breath. I turn my face toward the tinted window and watch the glowing neon sign of my restaurant slowly fade into the distance as the car pulls seamlessly away from the curb. The city moves past me in a blur of bright lights and deep shadows, but my mind is crystal clear. My chest feels incredibly light, as if a physical weight has been surgically removed from my ribcage. For 15 long years, I carried the heavy, suffocating burden of my parents' rejection. I let their cruel words dictate my internal worth, and I let their massive financial theft define my early struggles. I spent so much time wondering why I was never good enough to earn their love. But tonight, I finally set that heavy burden down right in the middle of their empty dinner plates. I forced them to carry the weight of their own destructive choices. I look out the window at the beautiful, sprawling city I conquered. I am totally and completely free. There are no more secrets hanging over my head. There are no more toxic relatives trying to drag me down to their level. My business empire is entirely secure, protected by the very laws they thought they could so easily manipulate. I survived the absolute worst things they could throw at me, and I transformed that raw pain into undeniable power. As the car glides smoothly down the highway, carrying me toward the beautiful, peaceful sanctuary of my own home, I realize something profound. For the first time in my entire life, I am no longer running from the trauma of my past. I am simply driving toward my future, and that future belongs exclusively to me. I thought my family finally wanted to heal our 5-year rift. They invited me to a private dinner, promising sincere apologies and a fresh start. Instead, I walked into a banquet of 15 relatives who had just devoured over $5,000 of premium lobster and Wagyu beef. My father wiped his mouth, slid the massive bill across the table, and told me to pay my dues. I did not scream or cry. I called the waiter over and whispered 3 short sentences. 10 minutes later, my toxic family learned a devastating lesson about the daughter they threw away. Let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who underestimated your worth.